Hello everyone, I'm Vanish Signal. Before we get into tonight's footage, hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Story 1, Sublevel Red. The facility wasn't listed on any current blueprints. Not on the department intranet, not in archived construction records, not even in the off-books incident logs maintained by retired engineers. The only reference anyone could find came buried in the fire suppression schematic. A single zone designation, R4. No door access, no ventilation, just a tiny red square labeled deep beneath the South Annex. Someone had erased it from every other document and missed just one layer. Or maybe they hadn't missed it. Maybe they wanted it to be found. It started with a motion alert. Officer Carlson was working overnight security when the system flagged movement in Zone R-4 at exactly 3:12 a.m. Problem was, that zone didn't officially exist. The alert shouldn't have been possible. Still, he pulled up the camera feed, expecting an error. But what he saw was worse than static. The footage was dark, oppressively so, but laced with a low, ambient red hue, like emergency lights were pulsing off-screen. Fog curled across the lens, not like smoke, but like breath. And faintly, just barely, something moved past the frame. A smear of motion, a glimpse of a limb, then nothing. They investigated, found a false wall in the lowest level of the South Annex. Drywall patch job over a steel door that shouldn't have been there. Hinges rusted, keypad dead, no visible power. But it was unlocked, not jammed, not forced, just open, as if it had been waiting to be used. Inside, the temperature dropped. The hallway beyond the door was narrow, paneled in some kind of metallic alloy that gave off a constant chill even without airflow. The scent was distinct. Old water, iron, dust that had never been disturbed. The stairwell behind the first corner descended far deeper than the foundation was supposed to allow. By the time Carlson and his partner reached the third landing, both their flashlights had dimmed to a sickly amber. No EM interference. Batteries checked out fine. But everything felt heavier. Like the air itself resisted movement, like their own weight had shifted. And then they saw the corridor. Sublevel Red wasn't a code name. It was literal. The walls weren't painted. They glowed. Not with artificial light, but with a slow, rhythmic pulse, as if something beneath the surface exhaled light with every breath. Crimson waves rolled across the hall every 3 seconds. To no source, no wiring, just a glow. 4 cameras were mounted in the corners, all routed to an internal closed circuit system that shouldn't have had power. 3 displayed only static. 1, however, blinked to life. The feed was low resolution, gritty, but clear enough to show a figure walking down the corridor. Slowly, wearing a faded hospital gown and a surgical mask. Barefoot, head slightly tilted like they were listening to something. The footage was silent. The timestamp didn't match the motion alert. It was exactly 12 hours earlier. When Carlson tried to rewind, the interface locked up. The monitor froze on a single frame. The figure turned. The mask was gone. Its face had no eyes. Just smooth, featureless skin. Since that night, every attempt to disable or sever power to the R4 feed has failed. The breakers reroute, the lines repower. Every night at 3:12 a.m., the monitor clicks on. And every time, it shows the same thing, a figure at the base of the stairwell. Head tilted, looking up. We made it past the second checkpoint without a single question. The guard didn't even glance up, just gave a lazy wave, like we were another pair of ghosts drifting through the underlayers. Maybe that's what this place did to you. The deeper you go, the more invisible you become, until the walls forget you ever arrived. The service elevator groaned like it had a memory. Long, hollow moans echoed as we descended, the cage clanking against metal supports that felt older than the building itself. No floor indicators, no digital panel. Just a rusted dial spinning lazily until it pointed into a blank red zone with no numbers. It stayed there, trembling slightly. I asked the tech riding with us, "How deep are we going?" But he didn't answer. Just adjusted his badge and stared at the flickering panel light like it might explain something. When the doors finally parted, it was like opening an oven in winter. The air was thick, warm, and metallic, like a mouthful of pennies and overheated circuitry. The smell caught at the back of your throat. Lights above flickered with mechanical uncertainty, buzzing a half second behind their glow, like the current pulsed from somewhere non-local, someplace not mapped. This wasn't a floor. It wasn't part of the regular architecture. It was something buried. No windows, no signs. Just a corridor stretching left and right, flanked by matte black doors with pressure seals and no handles. Industrial hinges, nothing labeled. The tech turned left without a word, reached a gloved hand to a wall-mounted unit, and tapped in a string of digits. The lock hissed, releasing with a sound too organic, like steam escaping from lungs. The room they brought us to was marked on their clipboard as a retention bay. It looked more like a surgical theater stripped of pretense. Concrete walls, seamless and soundless. A ceiling-mounted camera tracking every move. A steel table in the center, restraints looped into it. Not padded, not shaped for human use. More like anchors than cuffs. Across from us was a large mirrored panel that reflected the room with surgical clarity. Except it didn't. I caught it first. My reflection, just a blink late, a hair off. But enough. I turned slightly. It didn't. It just stared, then adjusted to catch up, like it was remembering how to act like me. I flinched. The others didn't seem to notice. "Your job is to monitor the response cycle," the tech said. His voice had changed. Flatter, mechanical, like he was reading it off a memory card. No speaking, no movement unless prompted. It's listening. "What's listening?" I asked, already regretting the words. He didn't answer. He just turned his eyes toward the glass. Then the overhead lights dimmed, sliding from sterile white to deep, pulsing red. That's when it moved. Behind the mirrored panel, a figure leaned forward. Slow. Intentional. Not startled by the change, activated by it. Its outline shimmered behind the glass, not distorted but staticky, like it was filtered through an old analog TV barely holding its channel. Upright posture, but slightly hunched, like it hadn't moved in a long time, and now it was remembering how. It stepped toward the glass, and I saw my face again. Not a reflection, not a glitch. My face, but stretched into something unfamiliar. And then it smiled, a smile that didn't belong to me. Not fully, not recently. Just close enough to trigger a sense of memory, like seeing a picture of yourself as a child you don't remember taking. "Don't let it recognize you," the tech whispered. His tone didn't waver. His mouth barely moved. Then the observation feed kicked on. Every monitor flickered, loops of prior sessions jittering into place. Old logs. Repeats. People sitting in our exact spots, saying nothing. And in every clip, eventually, the figure on the other side of the glass would stop watching the room and start watching them. Then everything would start to loop. We reached the elevator shaft at 3:19 a.m. It shouldn't have been operational. Every document we had said it was sealed after the 2008 incident. But the panel glowed dim red, one button lit, B6. We hesitated. No one wanted to be the one to press it. Then the button blinked. Once, like it was answering. Davis stepped forward, ran a system scan, said the signal wasn't coming from us. Not wired, not hard-lined, just active. The door opened by itself. Cool air rolled out. Not just cool, cold. We stepped inside, the whole team packed tight. No one spoke. The panel didn't have floor selections, just that single red-lit button, B6. We didn't press it, we didn't have to. The door shut, the car dropped. No movement, no sound. But we all felt the descent in our guts. Pressure in the lungs, ears ringing like we were being pulled downward through something thicker than air. The lights above us flickered in a pattern. White, red, white, red. Faster, then all red, then out. The elevator stopped. Door opened. Pitch black. Davis switched to thermal. He said, "You're not going to believe this." And then he stepped out. The hallway stretched both ways, longer than the building's entire blueprint allowed. Pipes along the ceiling were hissing in rhythm, not random, like breath. Exhale. Inhale. We moved as a unit, slow, flashlights cutting through the dark. On the walls, old facility signage was burned off, like it had been scraped or melted. Only one arrow remained, pointing deeper, labeled simply, "Relay." Reynolds asked what we were relaying. No one answered. We were all thinking the same thing. Maybe we weren't here to send anything. Maybe we were the message. A loud metallic crack rang from behind us. The elevator closing, then ascending. Fast. No callback function. No signal. It left us. That's when we heard the first voice. Not from ahead, from the vents above. Whispering, layered, familiar. Our own voices, but distorted. Authorization confirmed. Proceed. We didn't give any. Then the lights came on. Just down the hallway, one by one, leading us forward, toward the relay room, or whatever was wearing that label now. Security logs showed nothing. No breaches, no activity, no alerts. Just a clean, uninterrupted block of blank data between 2:10 a.m. and 3 a.m. Every motion sensor, every camera feed, every biometric log, all showing nothing, which was impossible. Because I was there. I was inside. And whatever was inside with me, it knew how to erase itself. It didn't trip any sensors. It didn't leave a trace. But it left something else. The silence. Not the absence of sound. True silence. The kind that lives behind your eyes. After the figure disappeared into the vent shaft, I tried contacting the surface. No response. The red channel light blinked once, then died completely. I was cut off. My headset began to hum. A slow, deep vibration that pulsed directly against my eardrum, like feedback from a microphone buried in flesh. I ripped it off. It felt like something was trying to crawl through the frequency. Not data, not signal. Presence. There was no protocol for this. The layout of sub-level red wasn't on the standard schematics, but the blueprints I'd found earlier, tucked away in a locked cabinet marked archive, showed a secondary maintenance passage cutting behind the cold storage area. That's where I headed. The hallway was slick with condensation, the overhead lights flickering in an irregular rhythm that didn't match the usual grid pulse. The metal grated floor groaned with every step, bowing like something underneath was breathing. It didn't feel like infrastructure anymore. It felt like anatomy. The further I moved, the more I felt it. The sense that the facility wasn't abandoned, but watching. Every panel I passed, every ceiling vent, every reflective surface, it felt like something unseen was shifting to observe. Like it was pivoting to stay just out of view. I started catching glimpses, not shadows, but anti-shadows. Areas where light should be, but wasn't. Spaces that swallowed vision instead of reflecting it. I reached the maintenance access tunnel. The hatch was rusted, edges warped with heat damage, but it gave with enough pressure. On the other side was a narrow crawl space, lit only by the glow of emergency strips, still running somehow, though the power was supposed to be offline. As I crawled forward, the tunnel walls seemed to narrow. Not physically, but perceptually. Like depth was changing, like distance was folding, like space was becoming a lie. Then I heard movement, scraping low to the ground, too slow for a person, too fluid for machinery. I froze. The sound stopped. Then came a breath, wet, shuddering, directly behind me. I turned slowly. Nothing. The tunnel was empty. But when I turned back to continue, my path was different. The tunnel had changed. Instead of leading toward the cold storage bypass, I was now heading toward a door marked Psyysored. I hadn't seen this room on any plan. The hatch was sealed by a keypad, its surface blinking with a faint blue light that flickered as I approached. I didn't enter a code. I didn't need to. The moment I got close, it unlocked with a hiss. Air pressure changed. A wave of warmth hit my face, and the sound of breathing intensified. Not mechanical, not recorded, biological, familiar. I stepped inside. The room beyond wasn't a room. It was a chamber, circular, metal walls etched with symbols too sharp to be language, too deliberate to be random. The etchings vibrated faintly when I looked at them directly, like they were aware of being observed. In the center stood a single chair bolted to the floor, surrounded by cables that pulsed faintly beneath their insulation. The chair was occupied. A figure sat strapped to the metal, its back to me, head tilted downward, unmoving. Tubes fed into its spine. A monitor above displayed only one thing: input loop, active. Then the figure turned, not its body, just its head. It had my face. The mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then a voice echoed from the room's intercom. Not from the figure, not from any speaker I could see, just from everywhere. Operator acknowledged. Replacement cycle in progress. The chair began to rotate. The restraints clicked open one by one. And then it stood up. Slowly, naturally, like it had done it 1,000 times, like it had studied me, like it had learned how I breathe. I didn't run. I couldn't. It took 5 full minutes for the reinforced elevator to respond to the override. I counted every second. The descent wasn't smooth. The cab vibrated subtly, like something was scraping against the shaft walls as we dropped below the main grid. No floor indicators, no light shifts. Just a growing sense of pressure as we went deeper. When the doors finally opened, it was like stepping into a sealed memory. The hallway ahead was lined with smooth white panels, sterile and quiet. But underneath the silence, the hum was still there. Not mechanical, biological, like breathing amplified through ducts. Agent Reese and I moved together, flashlights cutting through the stillness. The lights overhead were dim, emergency glow bars barely clinging to life. The floor was dry but stained, like it had been scrubbed too many times. We passed a junction with signs marked observation and long-term isolation, all of them scratched. None of them looked like they'd been used in years. Then we reached the final door. It had no panel, no access pad, just a window, small, reinforced, fogged from the inside. I looked in. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The room beyond was mirrored on all sides, a perfect cube of reflection. Standing in the center, still back turned, was a figure in my uniform. Same boots, same jacket, same sidearm, same shoulder patch. Reese exhaled sharply. "Don't move." But I didn't move. Neither did the figure. Then, slowly, it turned. perfectly matching my pace as I shifted to the left. Its face came into view, and I stopped breathing. It was me. Not a reflection, not a trick of the glass, but a physical double, every detail accounted for. Even the fresh cut I'd gotten on my knuckle climbing the fence 2 nights ago. Then it smiled. Reese stepped in front of the door, trying to find a latch or release, but there wasn't one. He called for dispatch, but his radio only echoed static. We were out of signal range, or something was blocking the frequency entirely. Inside the chamber, the double tilted its head and raised one hand. Pressed it against the glass. I instinctively stepped forward and did the same. My palm met cold. It mouthed something. 3 words. I remember you. Then, from the hallway behind us, another door hissed open. We spun around, weapons raised, but it was empty. Just another corridor, leading somewhere deeper. The hum grew louder, more defined, like words layered into tone. I turned back to the observation window. Empty, no one inside, just my own reflection. Reese stepped back. We need to go. I nodded, but I already knew it wouldn't matter. We'd gone too deep. Behind us, the lights flickered, a slow pulse, then a voice from the intercom. Subject released. That was 2:13 a.m. We never made it back to the surface the same way. The elevator returned empty. Dispatch lost our signal for 6 hours. When we reappeared, found wandering along the access road, our footage was corrupted. Time-stamped at 2:13 on loop. 17 minutes of silent black frames. I don't remember walking back. I don't remember what happened between seeing the double and waking up in the rain. But I do remember one thing clearly. I had a second ID badge in my pocket, with my name, and a photo I never posed for. End of story, story 2. Sublevel 6A. The building wasn't on any official blueprint, not in the public archives, not in the city's development records. But it existed, 4 stories above ground, 2 below, tucked between a closed-down battery plant and a half-demolished train depot just off South Kirkwell. Officially, it was listed as a logistics warehouse. No signage, no name, just a fence and a keypad gate that hadn't been used in years. We only found it because of a missing persons report. A janitor named Lionel Pierce worked nights for the Department of Records across the street. Reliable, clean file, no history of erratic behavior. But 3 days ago, he left a message on his supervisor's phone at 2:41 a.m. Short, panicked, barely audible. I found the stairs, he whispered. They go down too far. That was it. The next morning, he didn't clock out. His cart was still in the hallway. His keys were gone. So was his radio. Security scrubbed the footage from every hallway camera. They found nothing until they pulled the feed from the exterior lot. There, at 2:27 a.m., Pierce is seen standing at the edge of the lot, staring across the street at the abandoned warehouse. Then he moves. Deliberate, steady, straight through the gate, which somehow stood open despite being locked by code. He crosses the lot and reaches the front door, which opens without resistance. Then he disappears inside. He never comes out. We responded that evening. Myself and Agent Danner. No uniforms, civilian gear, just in case. We found the front gate unlocked again. No tampering. The lock still worked. It just didn't engage. The interior of the building was cold. Cleaner than it should have been. Empty shelving units, stacks of blank pallets. But the lights still worked, and the air inside hummed faintly, like something powered down only recently. We moved through each floor, top to bottom, found nothing, until we reached the sublevels. The elevator panel had no buttons for underground floors, but there was a key slot. Standard issue, federal grade. Danner had a universal override. Slid it in, turned it. The panel blinked, Sublevel 6A. Only one option. No other numbers. No description. We looked at each other. I hit the button. The elevator descended for 2 minutes. No music. No announcements. Just the distant creak of cables and the hum of something far below. When the doors opened, it wasn't a hallway waiting for us. It was a window. A floor-to-ceiling pane of glass, looking into a long room, white, sterile, faintly lit by overhead fluorescence. The lights flickered in sequence, like they were waiting to warm up. And at the far end of the room was a door. No handle, no label, just metal. And standing in front of it was Lionel Pierce. He didn't look up, didn't move, just stared at the door like he was waiting for it to open. Danner raised his hand, tapped on the glass. That's when Pierce turned. His face was wrong, not damaged, not distorted, just out of phase, like a bad render in a digital model. His features shifted between frames, lagging slightly behind his movements. His mouth opened. He spoke. But we didn't hear him through the glass. We heard him over the intercom in the elevator. "You're too early," he said. "Come back when you've forgotten yourself." The lights flickered. Then the elevator doors closed on their own. We tried to override. Nothing worked. It rose on its own, back to ground level. When we tried to descend again, the panel no longer had a slot, just blank buttons and no trace of sublevel 6A. The tunnel to sublevel 6A wasn't marked on any of our blueprints. It was buried behind a warped and rusted service door at the far end of a corridor nobody had used in years. Dust blanketed everything up to the threshold. But inside the frame, the floor was clean, like someone had been through recently. The overhead fixtures were dead. Motion sensors didn't react. The darkness was so thick it seemed to push against our headlamps, making the air feel heavy, almost resentful of light. Concrete walls lined the narrow path, coarse and unpainted, wet with condensation. Lower down, streaks of something blacker seeped from between the seams like rot. We moved in single file. No chatter, no orders. The space felt like it punished noise. Every footstep sounded wrong, too soft, too delayed, like the echo was happening somewhere else entirely. 20 meters in, the walls began to compress. The temperature dropped hard and fast. Frost webbed across Rodriguez's optics in seconds. She wiped them down, squinted forward, and then stopped cold. "There's someone down there," she said quietly, not moving. We killed our lights, waited, eyes adjusting to the dark. Down the corridor, barely visible, stood a figure, human-shaped, upright, unmoving. Its arms hung too low, its head tilted in an unnatural angle like it was listening with something other than ears. We advanced carefully, keeping formation. 10 meters out, the shape resolved. Not a person. A mannequin. Medical grade. Propped awkwardly against the wall. Plastic skin stained, eyes missing. No wires. No mounts. Nothing to suggest it was placed there for training or surveillance. Just standing, as if left behind, or waiting. A paper tag was stapled into its chest, ink faded but legible. "You left this here." Rodriguez crouched down to inspect the floor beneath it. Her breath hung tight in the cold air. "There's no dust," she muttered. "No debris. This path's been used recently." We advanced another 30 meters until we reached a thick steel door labeled simply 6A. No window, no knob, just a keypad mounted beside it, mechanical with 6 digits rubbed smooth from wear. I raised my radio to call command for clearance. Before I could speak, the keypad beeped once. The door clicked, then slowly swung open by itself. Beyond it, light. Clean, sterile fluorescence that hummed with regular pulses. The air smelled like industrial cleaner and old paper. We crossed the threshold. The doors sealed behind us with a deep, echoing clang. Inside, we found something that didn't belong anywhere in our reality. Rows of office desks, file cabinets, old cork boards with faded memos pinned in tidy rows. The furniture looked like it hadn't been touched since the late 1970s. Except it wasn't dusty. It wasn't old. Everything was pristine, maintained, ready. But what chilled us wasn't the setting. It was the nameplates. Every desk had one, and every single nameplate matched someone on our team. Rodriguez, Patel, Langston, even mine. We didn't speak. We just walked. At my desk, a manila folder lay open, as if expecting me. Inside, a printed transcript. This mission, our steps, every line spoken so far. Time-stamped and highlighted. No handwriting, just black ink on ivory paper. At the bottom, final entry, do not continue. They made it to the lower levels by rerouting power through a bypass terminal disguised behind a false utility locker. According to the diagrams, sub-level 6A wasn't on any architectural blueprint. It branched off an emergency access tunnel that didn't exist on paper. To even get near it, they had to kill the main feeds to levels 4 through 7 and manually trigger a failsafe to unlock the blast door. A door, by the way, with no visible handles, no keypads. Just a scanner that didn't seem to scan anything at all. When it opened, it didn't slide. It retracted, slowly, like something backing away. And the air that rushed out wasn't stale, it was humid, metallic, the scent of oxidized copper and damp machinery. Inside, the corridor dropped steeply into a descent without handrails or lights. The walls weren't concrete anymore. They looked poured, like some blend of polymer and resin. Glossy, seamless, and warm. They used helmet cams to record everything, but by the time they were 20 meters in, the feeds began to distort. Not static, just wrong. Like the footage was lagging a few seconds behind reality. Movement would happen, then echo back on screen later, slightly off. They marked their path with chalk, but the lines vanished within minutes. Just faded out, like the walls absorbed them. No smudging, no dust, just gone. Then came the humming, low, pulsing. At first, it felt like background machinery. Then it synced, not with the lights, there were none, but with their heart rates. One of the team called it biofeedback, half joking. But as they kept moving, the pulses matched their breathing, and then matched their footsteps. Each thud of a boot echoed with a harmonic that came back slightly out of tune. By the time they reached what they assumed was a junction, only one cam was still transmitting clearly. And that's when they saw the shapes. Not movement exactly. More like the suggestion of movement. Shadow cast on nothing. Mass shifting without light source. Something that rearranged the air as it moved. One team member, Ramirez, raised her scanner and called out, but her voice came back delayed and warped, as if she'd spoken underwater through glass. Then she vanished, not in a flash, not with a scream. 1 second she was beside them, the next her space was just empty, like she'd never been there. Her gear remained. Her scanner clattered to the floor. Her helmet cam blinked once and went dark. They didn't scream. They didn't run. They backed out, slow, keeping formation, guns raised. The corridor seemed longer than before. Every turn looped slightly, leading them back to places they didn't remember passing. The floor beneath them no longer sounded solid. Their boots tapped with a kind of hollow flex, like walking over stretched vinyl. By the time they made it back to the blast door, only 3 of them remained. 2 refused to speak. One was bleeding from both ears, eyes unfocused, whispering something about mirrors inside the walls. They tried to seal the level again, but the control panel had no response. It wasn't until they replayed the cam footage at headquarters that they noticed the final frame before Ramirez vanished. In the reflection of her visor, paused and enhanced, there was another figure. Not one of the team, not in any known uniform, standing just behind her, smiling. The elevator doors creaked open slower than expected, grinding apart with a shudder like they hadn't moved in decades. What lay beyond wasn't a hallway or a sub-level corridor. It was a cavernous, low-ceilinged chamber that stretched wider than our flashlights could reach, lit only by a row of dim amber bulbs embedded along the floor, each flickering at an uneven rhythm. The air was heavy with dust and cold as a crypt. The walls were unfinished, lined with pale insulation that looked moth-eaten, while thick bundles of wiring snaked across the ceiling like arteries, disappearing into crudely drilled holes in the concrete above. We stepped in, and the temperature dropped so fast it stole the breath from our lungs. Our exhalations fogged immediately, and the crunch of our boots echoed with eerie sharpness, like we were walking inside the hull of an abandoned cargo ship. The air was dead. No flow, no hum of machinery. Just the soft, steady tick of failing bulbs and the far-off, inconsistent plink of water dripping onto metal from somewhere deep within the dark. Jules was the first to notice something wrong. He picked up a small shard of glass nestled in a pile of dust near the base of the far wall. It was a mirror fragment, jagged, triangular. The edges shimmered strangely, like they'd only just been broken. He turned it to the light, and that's when we saw it. A reflection that didn't match the space around us. There in the mirror was a simple table, a steel chair, and a man seated at the table, back turned, motionless. We whipped around. Nothing, just the same cold, empty floor. But the mirror showed the scene clearly, and slowly, the man began to move. One hand lifted and tapped against the table. Tap, tap. Pause. Tap. Like he was signaling something. Maybe a code. Then he turned his head toward us. His face was all wrong. No eyes, no mouth, no contours at all. Just a smooth, blank stretch of skin, like someone had started sculpting a human face but never finished. Yet somehow, it still felt like he was staring straight through the mirror at us. Jules dropped the glass. It hit the floor and shattered into a sound far too loud for the dead air of the room. In an instant, every light blinked out at once. Total black. I clicked my flashlight on. The beam sputtered weakly, barely cutting more than 10 feet ahead. But it was enough. In the dust before us were fresh footprints. Single file, deep. They hadn't been there before. They were coming toward us. From the far end of the chamber, still no sound, no breath, no wind. We began backing away, one careful step at a time, retracing our path to the elevator. The moment we crossed the threshold, it was like flipping a switch. The overhead lights buzzed back to life. The hum of ventilation returned, as if the room itself had shut off all systems while we were inside, watched us, and only now resumed normal function once we'd left its reach. Later, we reviewed the footage from our body cams. We shouldn't have. The man, the one in the mirror, wasn't just in the reflection. During the 30 seconds of blackout, he stood behind us, clear as day in infrared, motionless, 7 feet tall, faceless, and raising a single finger to where his lips would have been. A silent warning. Don't tell. Sub-level 6A on Maughan wasn't just an off-grid storage floor or a forgotten expansion of the facility. It was an access point to something older and something that was still watching. The stairwell door slammed shut behind us with a metallic finality that felt deliberate. The silence afterward was unbearable. Not quiet, silent. Even our breath seemed to vanish into it. We were underground, deeper than any blueprint suggested, standing before a corridor that hadn't been there on any map. The walls down here were different, older. Concrete spines reinforced with steel bands, each stamped with a code that didn't match any format we knew. There were no cameras now, no lights, unless we activated our shoulder rigs. Just darkness and the rhythmic pulse we'd started to feel through our boots, steady like a heartbeat. We followed the pulse. The corridor narrowed as we walked, closing in around us. Each step seemed louder than the last, echoing in ways that didn't align with the space. Something was wrong with the acoustics. Our radio units had long since cut out. Now they were just hissing faintly, crackling like someone was breathing into them from far away. After what felt like an hour, but couldn't have been more than 15 minutes, we reached the chamber. A vaulted room, circular, lined with mirrored glass from floor to ceiling, though none of them reflected our image. In the center, on a raised platform, was a chair. Not medical, not industrial. More like something ceremonial, surrounded by a ring of scorched metal and debris. The concrete was cracked from heat or impact. All around the room, the mirrors flickered faintly, not reflecting us, but showing flickers of someone sitting in the chair, over and over. The same figure, but always slightly different. Hair length, uniform variation, injury location, sometimes twitching, sometimes still. We stepped into the ring. My partner froze. He was staring at one of the mirrors, mouth slightly open. "That's me," he said, but older. "I have a scar on my cheek. I don't have a scar." Then the version of him in the mirror moved. It looked up, met his gaze, then mouthed something, just one word. "Run." He stepped back. The mirror cracked from the center, spider webbing out like ice beneath a boot. I spun toward another panel. My reflection was smiling. I wasn't. Then all the mirrors blinked black. One by one, a new reflection filled them. Every one of them showing the same thing. The chair, now empty. The figure that had been there, gone. All mirrors but one. The final mirror showed the hallway behind us, and someone walking toward the room. Not on the floor, not past us. In the reflection only. We turned, nothing. When we turned back, the door behind us was gone. Not closed. Gone. Replaced with more mirrored glass, where our reflections had begun to lag. A full second delay, then two, then none at all. Except now, they weren't following us. They were watching, standing still, smiling. We backed to the chair. My partner sat down without a word, like he'd been here before, like it was rehearsed. I reached for my recorder, hit transmit, static, then a voice that wasn't mine. Sublevel 6A acknowledged. Candidate received. Chair is filled. The mirrors began to shimmer, and for a moment, I saw everything, every version of me that had entered this place. Some screaming, some silent, none escaping. And now there's one more. Transmission ends. End of story 3, North Lot sublevel. The key card shouldn't have worked. That was the first thing Officer Talley said when they pulled the footage. The warehouse had been shut down for 3 years. No utilities, no listed security contract. Just a city-owned shell of a facility marked for demolition, pending budget. And yet the cameras were still online. It started with a motion alert at 2:17 a.m. The south entrance, labeled SUBBACCESS on the camera overlay, registered movement. Not much, just a shape. But the door didn't open. No breach, no sound, just a flicker of static on the feed and then something inside. The internal camera came online 5 seconds later. That shouldn't have been possible. No internal system was powered. The feed was black at first, Then it blinked into color, like it had been waiting. A hallway, long, damp, lit by overhead fluorescence that shouldn't have had power. There was no timestamp, just a name burned into the corner of the frame. Sublevel NL Unoan. No one had ever labeled it that. No database entry, no matching format from the old camera system. The feed looked like it was being generated by something else. Then the figure appeared. Thin, uneven gait, hair wet and matted to the side of its head, clothes stained with something that shimmered on the tiles. It walked down the hallway with complete calm, no aim, no hesitation, like it knew exactly where it was going. Tally zoomed the feed manually. No facial recognition hit. But the eyes, when they turned toward the camera, glowed for a moment. Not from a reflection, from within. The lights in the hallway didn't flicker. They dimmed in sequence as the figure passed, like the building was reacting. Dispatch thought it was old footage, a loop, a residual signal left behind. But Tally shook his head. He pointed to the time on the control terminal. It's live, and it's waiting for something. They watched the feed for another 7 minutes. The figure never looked back, just walked into the darkness. At 2:31 a.m., the signal cut. Then, without prompting, another camera came online. Sublevel 02. Same hallway, different angle, no figure, but a new shadow on the wall. It matched none of the structural geometry, and it was moving. We combed through the footage frame by frame, analyzing every pixel like it held a secret. The motion detector had triggered just once, at exactly 2:11:38 a.m. A single data point, barely noticeable. Just a flicker of movement in the far left corner of the sublevel, right next to the old electrical panels. At first glance, it was just a blur. But once we enhanced the frame, something unusual emerged. The blur had structure. The form wasn't random. There were shoulders, a neck, the faint curve of a face. But the face wasn't looking at the camera. It was turned slightly upward, as if it were listening. Following protocol, we dispatched a new maintenance team. This time, we didn't use contractors. We sent in our own, a 2-man team outfitted with open-channel radios and active body cams. They descended into the sublevel just after 2 a.m., their boots echoing through the concrete stairwell. The instant they crossed the lower threshold, the radio signals faltered. Not just static, something deeper. Gurgling interference, like a failing transmission trapped underwater. Their voices filtered through in fragments, stretched thin, warped like degraded cassette tape. Then, silence. Both body cam feeds locked at precisely 2:14:7. Frozen. The final frame from each showed the corridor lights dimming, not flickering, but dimming steadily, like the power was bleeding away to some unknown source. Martinez, one of the techs, had turned his head toward something off-frame. His mouth hung open, caught mid-sentence. Whatever he said, we never heard it. The audio file was empty. Then the video stuttered. Both feeds went dark. We launched a recovery op exactly 1 hour later. The 2 techs were found seated, almost placed, against opposite walls deep in the sublevel corridor. Their heads were tilted back at identical angles, their eyes locked open, unblinking. Neither responded to touch or verbal prompts. No visible injuries, no signs of a struggle. But their radios showed signs of deformation. The speaker grills melted inward. Their body cams, though physically intact, held no usable data. Every recorded segment between 2:13 and 2:17 was blank. Not corrupted, blank, as if nothing had ever been captured. Martinez came to in the medbay 8 hours later. At first, he said nothing. He just sat upright, tapping the number 13 into the bedsheet with 2 fingers. Tap, 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 over and over. We ran full toxicology, clean, neuro scans, baseline normal. When we asked what happened down there, he finally spoke 3 words. It remembered me. The other tech never woke. His diagnosis, unresponsive dissociative state. He was transferred to long-term care within the week. While prepping him for the move, a nurse discovered something carved into the back of his ID badge. The engraving had warped the metal, etched in with a pressure that suggested a sharp tool and intent. The words read, "Second entry denied." No one could explain it. The badge had been inside his uniform pocket the entire time. As of now, North Lot remains fully sealed. Sub-level 1 is off limits. No clearances override the lockout. Still, the motion sensors continue to activate. At the same minute, every single night, 2:13 a.m. Each recording shows the same thing. The corridor, still. Silent. Empty. Except for the persistent shadow near the electrical panel. Always facing up, always listening. The footage from camera 14 was finally recovered. It had been corrupted at the source, the file name replaced with a string of zeros. But IT managed to scrub a working version. We gathered around the monitor in silence, watching the grainy black and white feed from the north sub-level service corridor. It was time-stamped 3:21 a.m. The hallway was empty, as expected. Just a maintenance cart pushed against the wall, a flickering light at the far end, and the door to storage 3B, chained shut, per the security report. The camera didn't move. There was no pan, no tilt. Then, at 3:24, something entered frame. It didn't walk. It just appeared mid-stride. One frame it wasn't there, the next it was. A tall figure, wearing the same maintenance coveralls as the missing tech, but with its head tilted too far to the left, chin nearly touching its collarbone. It didn't look at the camera. It didn't seem to acknowledge anything. It simply walked to the chain door, stopped, and tilted its head the other way. This time, too far right. The vertebrae should have snapped. It didn't use a key. It didn't break the lock. It just waited. And the chain unraveled itself, link by link, like something inside was unwinding it from the other side. When the door opened, the figure stepped in without hesitation. Then the feed cut to static. We checked the live feed. Camera 14 was back online. The chain was still there, still locked. But the door had shifted, just slightly, as if it had swollen from the inside. No one wanted to open it. Protocol said to wait for senior security. But something else happened. At 3:33, every camera in the north sub-level blinked at once. Just one frame skipped. It was only visible in side-by-sides. And on that frame, all of them, every camera, every angle, caught a shadow that didn't belong. Different shape, same location, right behind the lens. Not in front of it, behind it. We sent a unit down, standard pair, full kit. They reported nothing unusual on the approach. But when they turned the last corner before storage 3B, both their radios let out a single chime. No static, no call, just one high-pitched, clear note. Then both officers reported feeling watched, not followed, watched, as if something was already behind them but hadn't made itself visible yet. They turned back and found a second hallway, one that didn't exist on any blueprint, branching off from the north corridor like a surgical split. No signs, no markings, but the tiles were identical. The lighting matched, and the far end looked exactly like the main entrance, except in reverse. We told them to hold position, not to proceed. But their feeds went black. No disconnection, no audio cut, just darkness. like the cameras were still running but had been turned towards something that absorbed light completely. 10 seconds later, their mics picked up breathing. Only it was coming from above, not their position. Above our server room, and our server room doesn't have an upper level. Security is currently isolating the north sublevel. All personnel are to avoid proximity to storage 3B until further notice. If you are reviewing this footage and recognize yourself in Camera 14's loop, please report to admin immediately. We have reason to believe there may now be 2 of you. The elevators had no business going that far down. They were rated for 5 floors, maybe 6, but the panel inside showed 12. No labels, just numbers, and below G was a small, flickering -1 that hadn't been there before. When Mercer and Haddon stepped in, they didn't press anything. The elevator started moving on its own. It passed the ground level with a lurch and descended into silence. The light above the door dimmed the farther they went, until only the panel glowed faintly in red. Floor -1, then -2, then -3. When the doors opened, the air hit them like a wall. It was damp and wrong, like the guts of something long dead. A metal corridor stretched ahead. No signs, no markings. Just pipes overhead and industrial fans that weren't running. The ground sloped slightly downward, and their boots echoed with each step like the sound was being swallowed before it bounced back. "Where the hell are we?" Haddon whispered, hand on her sidearm. Mercer didn't answer. He was staring at a vent in the wall. Something had scraped the metal. Not a break-in, more like something trying to get out. Long, thin scratches fanned outward, evenly spaced, almost surgical. Halfway down the corridor, the lights blinked once, then came back dimmer. Mercer raised his radio. "Dispatch, come in. This is Unit 9-2. We're beneath the North Lot facility. Possible unauthorized substructure. Please confirm status of..." His own voice cut him off. Not over the radio, from behind. "Beneath the North Lot facility. Possible unauthorized substructure. Please confirm status of..." He turned fast. No one there. Just the hallway stretching back into shadow. Haddon drew her weapon. "That wasn't feedback," she said, voice tight. That wasn't an echo. Mercer nodded slowly. Number It repeated the hesitation, even the way I breathed. They moved faster after that, weapons drawn. At the corridor's end was a hatch, heavy, circular, pressure-sealed. But the lock was disengaged. Haddon leaned into it, braced herself, and turned the wheel. The door opened with a hiss. Inside was not a maintenance room. It was a surveillance hub. A bank of old monitors lined the walls, each one flickering with grainy feeds from security cameras. Some were from the upper levels, showing hallways they'd just passed through. Others were from angles they didn't recognize. Sub-level corridors, mechanical rooms, even what looked like a boiler chamber several stories below ground. But 2 monitors showed something else. Them, now standing in the surveillance hub. One feed from behind, one from above. Mercer stepped forward and waved. The figure on the screen didn't move. Then it did, but not with him. It turned to face the camera and smiled. Haddon took a step back, pistol raised, eyes flicking between the monitor and the empty corner behind them. "That's not us," she said. Mercer nodded once. "Number, but it's watching." And then all the screens went black. The concrete was sweating. That was the first thing I noticed. I'd made it down the ramp, past the 3rd gate, past the emergency bulkhead that was never supposed to open. I'd radioed in 3 times, but nothing answered. Static didn't even crackle, just silence, like I'd slipped through into something disconnected from the grid entirely. Ahead, the hallway stretched flat and low, the ceiling just 7 feet high. pipes exposed and dripping with condensation that didn't smell like water. I counted my steps. 53 to the first junction. 91 to the camera mounted at the angle I'd only seen in grainy screenshots and briefings marked "Do Not Distribute." The red recording light was blinking, even though the facility's power had been cut since 2009. I held up my flashlight and panned slowly. The beam caught movement in the corner. Fast, deliberate, then still. A figure, standing. No ID, no gear. Just a navy jumpsuit and bare feet, staring directly into the camera as if waiting for their cue. I raised my voice. "You need to identify yourself." No response, no flinch, not even a blink. And then, behind me, the sound of footsteps. Not echoing, not running, just one pace at a time. Like someone perfectly matching my breathing. I turned. Nothing. When I turned back, the figure was gone. I advanced past the camera into the open section, a square chamber roughly 30 feet across, ringed by half-finished concrete alcoves and long dead light fixtures. On the far wall was the vault door. Painted on the concrete just above it in flaking black stencil were the words, "Shelter Zero." Intake complete. It wasn't in any blueprint, wasn't mentioned in any report. No one on record admitted to installing it. The door was open, not wide, just enough. The space beyond was pitch black. Even the infrared on my backup cam couldn't punch through it. The light just died in the air like it had been swallowed. I should have left. I should have called it in and backed out. But something about the stillness, about the invitation, felt rehearsed. I stepped forward. The interior was lined with reflective panels, warped, pitted, scratched. They weren't mirrors, but they reflected just enough to show you almost yourself. I caught a dozen glimpses of my own silhouette, slightly wrong in every direction. One slouched, one too tall, one turned to look at me after I'd already stopped moving. Deeper inside, the floor changed. Metal grates replaced the concrete. The air turned warm, heavy. I felt like I was descending even though my boots stayed level. There was a hum now, deep in the walls. Mechanical, rhythmic. And then, in the very center of the chamber, I saw the monitor. One of those old CRT displays. It shouldn't have worked. It shouldn't have been powered. But it flickered with a grainy image. Security footage. Time-stamped 2 minutes into the future. I was on the screen, standing where I stood, breathing as I breathed. But in the footage, I raised my weapon. I turned, I aimed, and I fired. At nothing, until the timestamp matched the present. And that's exactly what I did. The report never made it out. When I returned above ground, there was no dispatch to call, no log to submit. Just empty air and static. My watch no longer tracked time. My phone refused to boot. My badge was missing. Only the camera on the wall kept blinking. When I passed it on the way out, it showed my face for a split second. Then someone else's. And then it turned off.